Some houses carry history in their walls. This one carried hunger. This really happened. A family moved in, and one by one the house took them. And the strangest part? A child was born there and somehow survived. October 3rd, 1986, 9:12 p.m. It began on a quiet suburban street, the kind of place where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, where neighbors waved across picket fences, and where no one locked their doors until bedtime. The house at the end of Maple Row had been empty for nearly a decade. Its shutters sagged, its paint peeled, and the lawn seemed to choke itself with weeds. People whispered about it but never lingered too long in front of it. That night, though, a moving truck pulled up. Its headlights washed over the cracked driveway as men unloaded furniture. A family of 4 followed close behind. Michael and Sarah Whitmore, their 2 children, Emily, age 7, and Jacob, age 4. Neighbors peeked through curtains, murmuring to one another that at last, someone was brave enough to take the place. "I never thought anyone would buy that house," one neighbor later recalled in an interview. "But when we saw the kids running across the lawn, it almost felt normal again." Almost. The Whitmores were an ordinary family. Michael worked in insurance, Sarah taught elementary school. They were hopeful that this old, discounted house could become their dream home. The first few nights, they brushed off the noises as old house quirks. But anyone who's ever lived in a creaky home knows the difference between settling beams and something else. On October 5th, just 2 days after moving in, Sarah wrote in her journal, "There's a sound in the walls. At first I thought it was the pipes, but it's deeper, almost like breathing. Michael says I'm just tired from the move. Still, I don't like it." Neighbors claim they saw the Whitmore's dog, a golden retriever named Max, refuse to cross the threshold. He'd sit at the porch and whine, claws scraping against the wood whenever they tried to pull him inside. By the end of the week, Max was gone. Some say he ran away. Others insist the family never mentioned him again. October 8th, 1986, 11:47 p.m. Michael was downstairs unpacking boxes. Emily padded into the kitchen in her pajamas. "Daddy, why's the woman on my wall talking to me?" she asked. Michael froze. "What woman?" "The one who hums at night. She said she's hungry." Michael laughed nervously, brushing it off as childish imagination. But that same night, Sarah awoke to a strange vibration in the floorboards beneath their bed. She swore it felt like the house itself was sighing, long and heavy, as though exhaling from deep within. Over the next week, small things began to shift. The light in the hallway flickered no matter how many bulbs they replaced. Doors swayed open even when latched. Emily's dolls would be found stacked neatly in the corner every morning, though she insisted she hadn't touched them. "I thought she was sleepwalking," Sarah said years later. But when I asked her, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "It wasn't me." She just likes them that way. By October 12th, the family tried to reassure themselves. They invited neighbors over for coffee, hoping to shake the uneasy feeling. But halfway through the visit, the kitchen clock began to tick erratically, so loud it drowned out conversation. The neighbor, Mr. Bennett, remembers excusing himself quickly. "I don't scare easily," Bennett said in a 1994 interview. But that house, it felt wrong, like it was watching you back. On October 14th, just after 2:30 in the morning, Sarah woke to the sound of creaking steps. She found Emily standing at the top of the basement stairs, eyes open but unfocused. "Honey, what are you doing?" she whispered, trying not to startle her. Emily's voice was flat, monotone. "It's hungry." Sarah's heart pounded. She lifted the child into her arms and carried her back to bed. Emily had no memory of it in the morning. But Sarah wrote in her journal that day. The way she said it didn't sound like my daughter. It sounded older, heavier, like something was speaking through her. October 20th, 1986, unease becomes fear. Michael began to change. He'd spend hours staring at the walls, lost in thought. At dinner, he'd sometimes grip his fork so tightly his knuckles went white. Sarah asked if he was stressed about work. He shook his head. "Do you hear it?" he asked quietly. "Hear what?" "The chewing." Sarah stared at him, horrified. "Michael, there's nothing." But that same night, both children woke up screaming. They claimed something was crawling under their beds, dragging its nails across the floorboards. When Michael looked, he found long, fresh gouges in the wood. Later investigations turned up local rumors about the property. Long before the Whitmores, a different family lived there in the 1940s. They too vanished under mysterious circumstances. The official story was that they left in the middle of the night, but some neighbors swore they heard screams. No one ever saw them move out, said Mrs. Carter, who lived next door. One day they were there, the next day they weren't. But the house, it didn't stay quiet after. October 25th, 1986, 10:17 p.m. Michael and Sarah sat at the kitchen table. The lights above flickered, humming faintly. Sarah whispered, "We need to get out of here." Michael rubbed his face, exhausted. "And where? We sunk everything into this place. We can't just leave. But something's wrong here. You feel it, don't you?" He hesitated. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, but it doesn't want us to leave." The Whitmores had been in the house less than a month. Already the cracks were showing, not just in the plaster walls, but in their minds. The neighbors had begun to whisper again. The dog was gone. The children were changing, and though no one wanted to say it aloud, the truth was becoming clear. The house hadn't stayed empty because of bad luck or poor maintenance. It had stayed empty because it had already eaten once. And now it was ready to eat again. November 2nd, 1986, 7:44 p.m. By their second month in the house, the Whitmores no longer dismissed the disturbances as quirks of an old home. They were changing, each of them in different ways. Sarah, once vibrant and hopeful about teaching, had developed dark circles under her eyes. Michael had grown distant, often staring at the walls for long stretches, whispering as though he was listening to something just beneath the surface. But it was the children who frightened Sarah most. Jacob had begun humming the same lullaby every night, one Sarah had never taught him. Emily claimed she didn't need toys anymore. "The house gives me games," she said. On November 5th, Sarah returned from the grocery store to find every light in the house switched on, buzzing at full brightness. Michael swore he hadn't touched a single switch. When he flipped the breaker, the bulbs kept burning for several seconds, then slowly dimmed one by one, as if the house itself was deciding when to release them. The following night, the phone rang at 3:17 a.m. Michael picked it up, expecting a wrong number. But instead of a voice, there was static mixed with something else. A faint sound like a child crying. "Who is this?" Michael demanded. The line went dead. November 8th, 1986, 9:22 p.m. as Sarah tucked Jacob into bed, smoothing his hair. "Sweet dreams, buddy." But Jacob's eyes were wide open. "Don't let her in," he whispered. Sarah froze. "Who?" "The woman in the wall. She's hungry again." Sarah backed away slowly, whispering to herself, "It's just imagination. It's just imagination." But when she returned to her room, she found Michael already sitting up. "Pale. I heard her too," he said. The neighbors began to notice by mid-November. Neighbors had started to whisper again. Mrs. Carter from next door noticed Sarah standing in the yard one morning, staring blankly at the house's windows. I waved at her. But she didn't even blink, Mrs. Carter recalled. It was like she wasn't there, just hollow. Another neighbor, Mr. Bennett, claimed he saw lights in the attic late at night, flickering, moving. But when I asked Michael about it, he said they never went up there. The attic was nailed shut. So who was up there? On November 12th, the family woke to find the dining chairs stacked in a perfect pyramid in the living room. The children swore they didn't touch them. Michael accused Sarah of trying to scare them, but Sarah insisted she hadn't moved anything. That evening, Michael placed his car keys on the kitchen counter, plain as day. The next morning, they were gone. He searched every drawer, every pocket, every inch of the house. Finally, after 3 hours, he found them neatly placed in the middle of Jacob's bed. Jacob was still asleep, clutching his blanket. November 14th, 1986, 11:53 am. The couple argued quietly in the kitchen while the children slept upstairs. "Sarah, this house is sick. We need to leave, Michael, before something worse happens." Michael, "And go where? We can't sell it this fast. No one will take it." Sarah, "Then we walk away. Forget the money." Michael, shaking his head, "You don't understand. It doesn't want us to leave." As if to punctuate his words, the overhead light flickered twice, buzzing like an insect caught in glass. November 17th, 1986, witness testimony on that night. A delivery driver reported seeing something unusual. While dropping off a package, he claimed he saw 2 figures moving in the upstairs window. "I thought it was the parents at first," he said in a later interview. "But then I noticed they didn't move right. Their heads were tilted and they didn't blink. Just watching me. I've delivered a lot of places, but that house? I never went back after that. Michael's behavior grew darker. Sarah caught him standing in the kitchen more than once, staring at the knife block. "What are you doing?" she whispered one night. He blinked as though waking from a trance. I don't remember coming in here." Sarah noticed his hands trembling, his fingernails lined with deep scratches, though he couldn't explain how he'd gotten them. Later, in her journal, she wrote, "It's not just the house anymore. It's getting into him, into all of us." On November 22nd, a carpenter came by to inspect the roof after Sarah complained of drafts. He refused to go inside. "There's something wrong up there," he said, pointing to the attic. "Nails don't just pop out on their own. Wood doesn't bend that way unless something's pushing from the inside." Michael dismissed him, but Sarah couldn't shake the thought. The attic had been sealed for a reason. November 25th, 1986, 3:16 a.m. Sarah woke to a sound she couldn't place. Not footsteps, not scratching, something heavier, dragging across the floor above them. She shook Michael awake. He listened, his face pale. "That's the attic," he whispered. But the attic had been locked, sealed for decades. Then came the unmistakable sound of something slamming against the attic floor. Once, twice, 3 times. The children screamed from their bedrooms, and for the first time since moving in, Sarah realized the truth. The house wasn't just settling. The house was awake. October 29th, 1994, 3:12 a.m. The night was still except for the faint rattle of wind against the rotting gutters. Inside the house, Daniel and Margaret awoke to a noise they could no longer explain away as pipes or settling wood. It was steady, deliberate, footsteps pacing the upstairs hallway. But no one else was supposed to be awake. And certainly no one else was supposed to be there. For years, neighbors whispered about the family that had disappeared within those walls. But this was the first time in decades that anyone lived in the house long enough to notice what it held inside. During the first week of occupation, the Aldridge family had dismissed the small things. A missing hairbrush, a light that flickered when Margaret walked by, a sound in the walls that Daniel claimed were just raccoons. But now, the disturbances formed a pattern. October 24th, 1994, 11:16 p.m. Anna Aldridge reported hearing whispering behind her closet door. She swore it was in a language she couldn't understand. Daniel checked. Nothing was there. October 25th, 1994, 7:30 a.m. Margaret found muddy footprints across the living room floor. They were too large to be hers, too small to be Daniel's, and Anna hadn't been outside. October 26th, 1994, 2:14 a.m. The family dog, Jasper, began growling at the staircase. His eyes tracked something moving upward, though nothing was visible. Within seconds, he whined, tucked his tail, and bolted under the bed. By the end of the week, Margaret started keeping a notebook, recording each event with dates and times. "If we're going crazy," she said, "then we'll at least have proof of when it started." October 27th, 1994, 8:47 p.m. Anna confided to her school friend Emily that something was wrong at home. According to Emily's later testimony, Anna's voice trembled as she said, "It doesn't feel like a house. It feels like it's waiting for us. And sometimes I think it knows me better than my parents do." Emily laughed it off as drama. But the next day, she begged Anna to come stay at her place for the weekend. Anna refused. "Mom won't let me. She says leaving now would make it worse." That single sentence would later puzzle investigators. Why would a mother believe leaving would anger the house itself? October 28th, 1994, 11:52 p.m. Daniel stumbled into the kitchen for water. He flicked on the light and froze. On the refrigerator door, written in condensation, though no steam had touched it, were 4 words. "This house is hungry." The letters dripped as though freshly scrawled. He rushed to wake Margaret, but when they returned, the message was gone. The surface was bone dry. Margaret didn't believe him at first. But the next morning, she found Anna sitting at the table, pale, staring at her cereal. "Mom," Anna whispered, "did you write on the fridge last night?" By the 3rd week, Daniel decided to investigate the house's history himself. Records at the local library told a disturbing story. The property was built in 1912 by a coal baron named Richard Marrow. In 1919, his wife and 2 children vanished without explanation. Their bodies were never found. The estate changed hands 5 times in the next 30 years. Each family reported strange disappearances until the property was abandoned in the 1960s. Daniel returned home shaken, carrying photocopied newspaper clippings. That night, he began tapping on the walls, searching for hollow spaces. October 29, 1994, 10:26 p.m. Behind the pantry, he found it, a false wall. With a crowbar, he pried it open to reveal a narrow passage reeking of mildew and iron. At the end was a small room, windowless, with walls covered in carvings. They weren't words exactly, more like crude shapes, spirals, figures with open mouths. In the center of the floor was a dark stain, circular and deep, as though it had soaked in over decades. Anna refused to step inside. Jasper barked wildly and would not approach. Margaret whispered, "Daniel, this isn't a house. It's a trap." October 29, 1994, 11:59 p.m. That night, the whispering began again, louder, more insistent. Margaret swore it came from the hidden room. Anna claimed she recognized one of the voices. It was her grandmother's, though the woman had died years before. Daniel locked the pantry and nailed boards across the false wall. But around midnight, the sound of scratching echoed through the house, as though something inside the room wanted out. The family didn't sleep. October 30th, 1994, 3:12 a.m. Daniel awoke to find the bedroom door open, though he had locked it. Margaret was still beside him. He sprinted down the hallway and found Anna's door ajar. Inside, she was gone. Her bed was neatly made, untouched. The window was locked from the inside. On her desk, carved deep into the wood, were the same 4 words Daniel had once seen on the fridge. "This house is hungry." And then came the sound, from deep inside the walls, from beneath the floorboards, from the very bones of the home itself. A heartbeat, slow, steady, heavy. Daniel fell to his knees, pressing his ear to the floorboards. His face went white. Margaret demanded to know what he heard. But he couldn't bring himself to speak, because it wasn't just a heartbeat. It was breathing, and it was coming from beneath their daughter's room. October 30th, 1994, 3:18 a.m. The house was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that pressed into the ears until it felt deafening. Daniel Aldridge stood in his daughter's bedroom, staring at the carving etched into her desk. "This house is hungry." Anna was gone. Margaret clutched the doorway, trembling. "Daniel, where is she?" Her voice broke into pieces. Daniel didn't answer. Because the truth was worse than words. Every instinct told him Anna hadn't left. She had been taken. October 30th, 1994, 3:40 a.m. Daniel grabbed a flashlight, tearing through every room of the house. He yanked open closets, pulled back rugs, pressed on the walls. Margaret followed, whispering prayers under her breath. At one point, she shouted, "Check the basement!" They ran down the creaking wooden stairs. The basement smelled of damp earth and rust. Old tools lined the shelves. A washing machine buzzed faintly in the corner, but the room felt wrong, warmer than it should have been. Like a body breathing beneath the floor, Daniel tapped the concrete wall with a hammer. Hollow. He struck harder. With each slam, dust fell, and the wall seemed to respond, vibrating faintly. Margaret yanked him back. "Don't," she hissed. "You'll let it out." October 30th, 1994, 4:10 a.m. As Daniel collapsed against the basement steps, Margaret spoke with shaking lips. "I didn't tell you everything about this house." She explained how her grandmother used to speak of the feeding house outside town, a place people avoided, even children daring each other never got close. Her grandmother swore the house consumed families piece by piece. "I thought it was just a story," Margaret whispered. "But when I saw the listing last year, when we moved in, I knew. I just hoped it had been forgotten." Daniel stared at her, disbelief etched into his face. "You knew this house was cursed?" Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. "I thought if we loved it enough, if we filled it with life, it wouldn't need to feed again." October 30th, 1994, 4:45 a.m. From upstairs. A sound broke the air, Anna's voice. "Daddy?" Both froze. It was soft, muffled, as though coming from the walls themselves. They scrambled upstairs, pressing their ears against plaster, following the sound down the hall. The voice grew clearer, desperate. "Mom? Help me, I'm cold!" It came from behind the boarded pantry. "The hidden room," Margaret sobbed. Daniel grabbed the hammer again, ripping the boards loose. The door swung open with a groan. The passage yawned before them, black and damp. At the end, the small carved room waited like an open throat, and in the center of the floor lay Anna's sweater. October 30th, 1994, 5:42 a.m. Daniel stepped inside, flashlight trembling. The carvings on the walls seemed to shimmer, shapes twisting in the beam. Spirals became open mouths. Stick figures stretched into writhing limbs. Margaret clung to the doorway. "Daniel, don't go in." But then they both heard it. Breathing. Heavy, close, as though something pressed against the very walls. Anna's voice echoed again. "Please, Daddy, don't let it take me." Daniel pressed forward, reaching for the sweater. He lifted it. Warm. Still warm, as if freshly worn. That's when the walls groaned, not like wood or stone. Like ribs expanding, the floor quaked. Dust fell from the ceiling. The carvings seemed to pulse. Margaret screamed for Daniel to get out. He bolted back toward her. But the passage tightened. The walls contracted like muscle. He squeezed through, ripping his shirt on jagged wood, tumbling into the pantry. The hidden room sealed itself with a thunderous slam. The boards Daniel had ripped away, they were back in place, nailed as if untouched. And the hammer he'd used now lay on the other side. Inside the wall, October 30th, 1994, 6:15 a.m. shaking. Daniel and Margaret retreated to the living room. Margaret urged him to leave the house, to find help, but Daniel refused. "We can't leave her. She's in there." He grabbed the family camcorder, an old Sony Hi8, and began recording every room. "If this thing wants us, fine. But the world will see what it does." In the footage, later recovered by authorities, there were strange anomalies. In the kitchen, a shadow crossed the frame, though no one was moving. In Anna's room, the words carved into the desk were gone. The surface was smooth. On playback, faint whispers overlay the audio. "Stay, feed, stay." October 30th, 1994, 7 a.m. The Aldridges hadn't slept. Margaret sat rocking in a chair, clutching Anna's stuffed rabbit. Daniel pored over his library clippings, muttering. "Each family lost someone," he said. "But it was always a child first. Always the youngest." Margaret's voice cracked. "Then it won't stop with Anna." Daniel slammed the table. "Then we make it stop." October 30th, 1994, 9:22 a.m. Armed with gasoline, matches, and sheer desperation, Daniel declared he would burn the house down. Margaret begged him to wait, to think. But as he stood at the foot of the stairs with a can in hand, the house made its move. The front door slammed shut on its own. Every window rattled. The wall shuddered, and then footsteps. Dozens of them, marching from upstairs, though the family had no guests. Slow, deliberate, in perfect rhythm. Margaret whispered, "It doesn't want to let us go." Daniel raised the match with shaking hands. "If it's alive, we kill it." But before he could strike, Anna's voice rang out again, clear as day, from the top of the stairs. "Daddy, why are you trying to hurt me?" Both parents froze, because standing there in her nightgown, pale as chalk, was Anna, but her eyes were not her own. October 30th, 1994, 9:27 a.m. At the top of the stairs stood Anna Aldridge, her small frame draped in a pale nightgown. Her hair hung limp, her lips colorless. But it was her eyes that froze Daniel and Margaret where they stood, wide, unblinking, too dark, as though the pupils had swallowed the whites entirely. She smiled, and in a voice both hers and not hers said, "Daddy, don't burn my home." "It needs us." Daniel's hands trembled around the match. Margaret staggered backward. "Anna?" she whispered. The girl tilted her head, movements jerky, unnatural. "She's still here. She's warm. But the house is warmer. It's safer. Don't you see? It's been waiting for us." Her words didn't match the tone of her mouth. Each phrase seemed layered, as if spoken by several voices at once. Deep, hollow, ageless. Margaret cried out, rushing forward. "Let her go!" She grabbed Anna's shoulders, shaking her. Anna's skin burned cold, clammy like wet stone. Her lips parted, and she whispered against her mother's ear, "I was born here. This is where I belong. You brought me back. October 30th, 1994, 9:45 a.m. Daniel dragged Margaret back, both shaking, and stumbled to his pile of clippings. He rifled through old newspapers, his mind connecting details. The Marrow family, gone in. 1919, a farmer's children, missing. 1938, a schoolteacher's daughter, swallowed in 1952, always the youngest. In one brittle article, nearly unreadable, a survivor gave testimony before leaving town. It doesn't kill them. It keeps them. You can hear them forever in the walls. The house doesn't eat wood or stone. It eats bloodlines. Daniel dropped the paper. His stomach turned to lead. The phrase rang in his mind. It eats bloodlines. That's why the house had waited decades for another family with a child to dare enter. October 30th, 1994, 10:12 a.m. Anna descended the stairs slowly, bare feet silent on the wood. Her smile didn't waver. The house is hungry, she said softly. But it doesn't need all of us. Only one, Margaret gasped. No, no! Daniel stepped forward. Take me. Take me instead. Anna's head shook, eyes flickering black. It doesn't want you. It wants me. And if you try to stop it, it'll take all of us. Behind her, the walls quivered, the wallpaper peeling as if from breath within. The faint sound of a heartbeat filled the house again, faster now. Hungrier. October 30th, 1994, 11:34 a.m. Daniel and Margaret tried everything. They dragged Anna outside into the front yard. She screamed so loudly neighbors a block away heard her voice distorted like broken speakers. She collapsed the second her feet touched grass, convulsing until they carried her back inside. Daniel splashed holy water, stolen from a church font, across her bedroom. The water hissed on contact with the walls, leaving black stains. But Anna only laughed, voice cracking like static. Margaret begged, offering prayers, deals, anything. The air grew colder. Every bulb in the house blew out at once. By noon, the Aldridges' new escape wasn't simple. The house didn't just contain Anna. It was Anna, or rather, it had made her its own. October 30th, 1994, 2:15 p.m. Desperate, Daniel returned to the basement with a crowbar. He hammered at the hollow wall. Concrete splintered, revealing damp soil behind it. From the darkness, a rush of air escaped, hot, fetid, reeking of rot. And then came the sound. Dozens of whispers overlapping, crying, begging. Margaret clutched his arm. Stop, those are the others. The ones it took. Anna's voice thundered from upstairs, louder than natural. Leave them alone. They're mine. The floor shook. Dust rained. The basement door slammed shut, locking them inside. Daniel slammed the crowbar again, and the wall split open, revealing a cavity filled with bones. Small ones. Child-sized. Margaret screamed. The whispers rose, forming a chorus. Stay. Feed. Stay. Feed. Margaret covered her ears, sobbing. Daniel dropped the crowbar, face pale as chalk. The truth was undeniable. The house wasn't cursed. It was alive. And it had been feeding on generations of children, binding their voices into its walls. And now, through Anna, it has found a way to speak clearly. October 30th, 1994, 3:40 p.m. When Daniel and Margaret forced the basement door open again, Anna was waiting at the top of the stairs. But she was different. Taller somehow. Shadows clung to her skin. Her smile was wide, too wide, stretching unnaturally. You've seen its stomach, she whispered. Now you know. I belong to it, and soon. So will you. Margaret rushed forward, pleading. Please, Anna, fight it. For the first time, the girl's real voice broke through, faint, trembling. Mommy. Help me. But the house wasn't letting go. Her eyes went black again, and her body jerked like a puppet on strings. October 30th, 1994, 4:12 p.m. Daniel lit another match. His voice shook. If we burn it, if we burn all of it, it dies. He doused the living room curtains in gasoline, striking the match. The flame caught instantly, spreading across the fabric. Smoke filled the air, the walls roared. Not creaked, roared. The sound was primal, furious. Like an animal in pain, Anna screamed, collapsing, clutching her chest as if the fire burned her from the inside. Margaret rushed to her, screaming at Daniel, You're killing her! But Daniel held fast. No, I'm killing it. October 30th, 1994, 4:20 p.m. The fire spread fast. Curtains, floorboards, wallpaper, all igniting. The air grew choking thick with smoke. Daniel dragged Margaret and Anna toward the front door. The knob was searing hot, but it gave way under his shoulder. They spilled out into the yard, coughing, heaving. Behind them, the house writhed. Windows shattered. The roof split like a mouth opening to scream. Neighbors later swore they heard voices in the smoke. Hundreds of voices crying out as flames consumed the structure. Anna lay in the grass, unconscious, her lips moving faintly. One neighbor leaned close to hear her words. They weren't in English. By the time firefighters arrived, the house was nearly gone, reduced to smoldering timbers. Daniel and Margaret held each other, convinced the nightmare was finally over. But when paramedics checked Anna, her pulse was steady. Too steady. A second rhythm beneath her own heartbeat. And as smoke curled above the ruins, one wall still stood upright. On it, blackened but visible, were the words burned deep into the wood. This house is still hungry. November 3rd, 1994, 8:10 p.m. 4 days after the fire, the Aldridge family sat in a borrowed motel room. The walls were beige, the carpet thin, the air faintly smelling of bleach. It should have felt safe. It didn't. Daniel hadn't shaved. His eyes were red, his hands raw from burns. Margaret barely spoke, staring at nothing for hours. Anna lay curled in bed, pale but alive. On the news, the story played over and over. Historic home destroyed in fire. Local family narrowly escapes. Neighbors told reporters about screams in the smoke. The fire chief said the blaze spread unnaturally fast, but no one outside the family knew the truth. No one knew what had fed inside those walls. November 5th, 1994, 6:22. A. Margaret woke to a sound in the motel room, a whisper. She turned toward Anna's bed. The child was sitting upright, facing the wall, lips moving. "Anna?" Margaret whispered. Anna turned slowly. Her eyes looked normal again, brown, human. But her expression was blank. "Did you say something, sweetheart?" Anna shook her head. "No, Mommy," but the whispering continued. Coming from the wall behind her bed, November 10th, 1994, 2:15 p.m. Doctors at St. Mary's Hospital ran tests. Physically, Anna was healthy. No burns, no smoke damage, but her EEG scans showed two distinct wave patterns overlapping. "Like a second consciousness," one neurologist muttered. He dismissed it as a machine error, but his hands shook when he signed the discharge papers. Margaret kept pressing the same question. "Is my daughter still—" "My daughter?" No doctor ever answered. Daniel struggled with guilt. He replayed every decision, moving into the house, ignoring the signs, trying to burn it. He carried the belief that his daughter's soul had been split in two, and half belonged to the house. Margaret blamed herself in silence. Deep down, she knew the stories her grandmother told. She had led them there, and Anna? She never blamed either of them. She just grew quieter. December 6, 1994, 11:59 p.m. In the weeks that followed, Anna began drawing constantly. Spirals, mouths, stick figures with black eyes. Pages and pages of them. When asked what the drawings meant, she shrugged. They're the ones still inside. At night, she sometimes stood at the window, whispering to the empty lot where the house had once stood. Daniel asked what she was saying. Anna's reply was simple. "Good night, February 14th, 1995, 4:44 p.m. The Aldridges drove past the burned property one last time before leaving town. Snow covered the ground. The house was gone, nothing left but blackened earth and the single charred wall still standing. Anna pressed her forehead to the car window. "It's not gone," she whispered. Margaret reached back to touch her hand. "Yes, sweetheart. We destroyed it." Anna turned to her, eyes unblinking. "No, it just moved." Years later, locals still tell the story of the Aldridge fire. Some say the family was cursed. Others say they staged it for attention. But those who knew them best tell a different story. They saw Anna grow up. They saw the way she seemed older than her years, the way shadows bent toward her when she walked past. They noticed how light bulbs flickered when she entered a room, how pets avoided her, and how she never truly left the house behind. October 30th, 2014, 11:47 p.m. Exactly 20 years to the night of the fire, Anna Aldridge, now grown, stood alone on an empty suburban street. She looked at the house before her. A neat two-story home, white siding, trimmed lawn, new owners. A young couple with a newborn baby. Anna smiled faintly. The wind carried a whisper no one else could hear. This house is hungry. And as she stepped closer, the porch light flickered. Some say houses remember the lives inside them, but this house was different. It didn't just remember, it was consumed. The Aldridge family escaped with their lives, but not all of their souls. Anna carried the house with her, proof that fire couldn't destroy hunger, because hunger always finds a new home. And if you're listening to this, maybe it's already closer than you think. The end.